Hello, friends. It's been a little while since I've done an update, and I've been meaning to check in, and I'm just running some errands. Therefore, I'm in a car, and it's April 1st. I'm recording this video April 1st, and wildly enough, it's kind of snowing outside. It's like 3 degrees. I really could use some sunshine. Anyway, I just wanted to check in on a personal note and just a couple things that I wanted to share and that I've been sitting with for probably a few weeks now. And I feel like I might have kind of talked about this in like a more broader sense in some of the other videos that I uploaded. But anyway, so I currently am really just trying to do everything to kind of support my current like baseline of energy, which means that I've had to basically give up work for the last 2 months now. It's been end of January was the last time I was actually able to work, and then February had a big crash. That was about 4 or 5 weeks. And then you started seeing some of the videos as I was just coming through that and just starting to like move outside in the sunshine for the first time. And I just wanted to kind of talk about one specific thing. It's not really one, like, of course, it's like there's more timeline than just like one moment, of course. Like, I hate that sometimes when people are like, this is the moment. And it's like, yeah, sometimes there is a moment that changes your life, but sometimes there's a lot of small things that add up to kind of decisions. And I actually think that it's really important to note that, like, whatever decision that you make, or like that I make, or that we all make in the moment, that's best for us in the moment. I think it's really important to like be gentle with us and like compassionate towards ourselves, because it's important to remember that we only know what we know now, and we have to make our decision based on the now and how we want to move forward based on what we know. And it might not be the right decision. In fact, it's really normal to make wrong decisions, and I think it's important to kind of give ourselves some permission and grace around that, because this is a decision that I've kind of waffled back and forth with because of my lack of work, because of even when I am working, like, I'm not really able to work full time, and the financial sustainability for me for a while now has been really challenging. And of course, when you're dealing with chronic illness and financial stress on top of it, it's just, yeah. Anyway, it's a thing. So, one of the things that I have been considering, because there are different resources for chronic illness patients in BC and British Columbia, where I'm currently located, and some of them run through the BC Women's Hospital in the Lower Mainland in the Vancouver area. And there are like different, so there's different programs. So they have a program for Lyme's disease, for ME/CFS, and I think for fibromyalgia and a few other things. And so I've been kind of sitting with, like, maybe it's time to engage. Like, for the last, so like a little bit of my background again, it just, very cold notes. I don't want to repeat myself or make a super long video, but essentially, before even ME/CFS, I actually struggled with chronic pain in my late teens and early to mid 20s. It was probably about 10 years. And I was able to actually heal that condition through a lot of shifts in perspective and kind of moving towards more somatic based work, and not just somatic based work, but kind of almost like artistically somatic based work. Like, I worked a lot with continuum movement. That's how kind of what led me into studying biodynamic craniosacral therapy and becoming a craniosacral therapist. So there was like a lot of my own personal healing that kind of led me to the practices that I started to actually, after years of my own practice, started to like teach and learn at the same time, right? Through these, through taking different courses in Continuum, through a lot of actually esoteric movement classes. I studied with many different people, including, if you're familiar with Bliss Cook and SOAS stuff. So anyway, I was exploring all these different kind of pioneers in the body and in movement and working with expression, embryology, origins. And that really changed and shaped, just to kind of give you a little bit of a background for my own personal history, that really, really changed fundamentally how I view the body and health and like, why are we even here, right? Like, we don't even understand what the body is and what it's for, right? Like, despite the fact, like, we're still trying to figure this out, or in the mystery of it, whatever, however you see it. So because I had that experience with healing, a very difficult and challenging and emotionally charged chronic pain, illness at a really young age. I mean, like, most people identify that age in their late teens and 20s as like the best health that they usually have, right? And for me, there was a lot of challenge and healing that came through that. A few years later is actually when I got a virus that kind of never went away, and that's what manifested originally into ME/CFS, and that was probably about 13 years ago now. And a couple years later, I was able to actually go into remission. And for those of you who didn't see the early videos, I attribute that a lot to the previous learnings that I came into. I was practicing what I preached and also practicing what I had been practicing. And I think there's a lot of different factors that led to that 8-year remission, where my energy in my body was like, in my 30s, is like better than I ever felt in my whole life. And like literally, which was surprising and really cool. And so I am sitting with now like this place of like, I'm in a different time frame where at least some of the medical field, the Western medical field, acknowledges ME/CFS as a real thing. And there are resources, including potentially financial ones, which I would love and am in need of, right? And at the same time, one of the core factors that has supported and grown my own health is very different, and maybe even in contradiction to the song and dance of the Western medical model, right? And so I've been sort of like conflating these polar opposites and realizing like, well, in order to get resources and all the things, like I started to realize of like I have to really prove myself as being sick. And it's not that I'm not, but I started to think about like, of the energy and resources I have, like how much do I want to spend on fighting for my illness, and versus spending that energy in fighting for my health and well-being. And I've been really sitting with this kind of question, I guess, for a while. And I started to make the first steps. I started to make some appointments. I don't have a GP anymore. I used to have a general practitioner who was really lovely when I lived on the coast near Vancouver many years ago. And he no longer practices at a clinic. I, moved to Mexico, all the things. So I am on a waiting list for like an actual doctor, which might take years. And in the meanwhile, the current like health system for, when you don't have a doctor is kind of challenging. And I think one of the things I'm realizing is pre and post pandemic here in Canada have really changed how things kind of were adapted, and then they never kind of went back, and they were never really great systems to begin with. They were kind of hacked together for the the pandemia, and no one and people are kind of still running in that sort of system, which has become sort of digitized, automatized, but it's not really actually improved. It's kind of made it worse, unfortunately. Anyway, so I'm not going to get into that. So anyway, we're going to the groups and things, and I kind of had a moment. So I went to the local kind of walk-in clinic, which is not, they don't really exist, especially in the interior and rural areas like I'm at right now. They're not really a thing anymore. I think in larger centers they still exist. But here there used to be several, and they just don't exist anymore. A lot of resources also have gone into other priorities, which is fair. Okay. So, I went in, realized that I was kind of just basically, in order to kind of get into the program, I need to actually see a physical person who can do a physical assessment and submit that to BC Women's. And the irony of actually getting to see a physical person, even for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, is impossible unless you go to emergency. And I was sort of complaining, there are people who are actually require emergency care. And so, I realized there's this, it kind of all these different activities and things have brought me back to the same question of, there is a lot of energy that needs to go in, and where do I want to direct that energy? And after kind of doing the initial kind of putting some of the energy into that, I think I've made a decision, at least for now, that I'm no longer, for the moment, going to pursue the BC Women's Health or the BC Women's Hospital program. And I'm basically going to come back to square one, my practices that I started with years ago, and that of course I've been practicing, but it's kind of becoming my full-time job now. Is this learning. And so there's been a lot of rest, a lot of really quiet sounding work, and I'm coming back to my continuum practice and other things that are accessible to regardless of whether I can get out of bed or not, and just being with that. And I've just been doing a lot of reading and writing and research, and I realized that I need to spend my energy on what I know will be helpful and supportive for me, which is really building up my resources, building up my inner support systems, inner and outer support systems, but really putting my energy into health, whatever health is there, whatever health looks like. And so I feel like that is, at this time, the best use of my resources, and I think that everyone needs to kind of make their own choice, but I really had to ask myself, how hard do I want to fight to prove myself sick when I know that I have been in a state of long-term recovery, and I know that is physically possible for myself. And I know that deep down, that rather than really focusing more and more and more on pain, that if I can broaden my experience, if I can broaden my perspective, I can broaden my perception and awareness and actually expand that, it means that I will have access to a different state of being. And I don't know what that is, but to me that is just so much more hopeful and light. Not necessarily easier, but it's like, it feels like the most productive place to put my energy at this point. And I feel like that really, for me anyway, is the path to more wellness and more resources. And I mean, to be honest, I would love to work and teach again. And so I would like to be able to have some sustenance from that. And I think that's possible. And so I'm going to kind of really, I guess, take advantage of whatever resources I have available to me right now. And really, even if it's just a little bit of energy, or a little bit of help here and there, just to lean into that and focus on health rather than fighting for illness. So anyway, that's my update. Hope you're all well, and because it's a bit cold outside, I need to get going, get the car started, get the heater on. It's chilly. So anyway, sending you all love. Mwah.